Welcome to Cold Blood Files channel, where we uncover real-life crime stories that are as chilling as they are true. If you're into true crime, psychological thrillers, and the darkest secrets hidden behind everyday smiles, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single episode. In today's video, we dive into a case that shocked the entire United States. A man who seemed perfect, husband, father, respected educator, coldly murdered his own family in one of the most disturbing crimes ever recorded. And what's more terrifying, he almost got away with it. He didn't just kill. He staged the perfect alibi. Cross-country flights, witnesses, receipts. For a moment, even law enforcement thought he was innocent. But in the end, what unraveled his deception wasn't a witness or a camera, it was a bug. A tiny insect that spoke louder than any lie he could fabricate. This isn't just a murder story. It's a haunting reminder that the monster you fear might not hide in the shadows, but sit beside you at the dinner table, tuck your child in at night, and smile at you each morning. This is the story of Vincent Brothers, a man who wore the mask of morality while hiding a heart of pure darkness. Stay with me until the very end, because the deeper we go, the more disturbing the truth becomes. From the blood-stained crime scene to the forensic twist that changed everything, this is a case you won't believe is real. At first glance, Vincent Brothers had it all. He was sharp, well-spoken, and respected in his community. A vice principal at a local middle school in Bakersfield, California. To students, he was a role model. To parents, a trusted figure. To neighbors, the kind of man you'd never think twice about handing your house keys to. And to the world, he looked like the embodiment of the American dream, a black man who had risen through the ranks of education, married a beautiful woman named Joni Harper, and had 3 young children. Picture perfect. But the more perfect a picture looks, the more likely it's hiding something. Vincent wasn't just wearing a suit and tie, a former coworker would later say, he was wearing a mask. Behind that neatly pressed collar and carefully curated charm, Vincent Brothers was living a double life, a dark, fractured reality that only those closest to him began to suspect, too late. While the public saw a man of discipline and structure, the people within his home felt something else entirely. Vincent had a temper. He was emotionally distant, controlling, and in many ways, emotionally abusive. Joni, his wife, knew this. She had once divorced him, only to reconcile and remarry, hoping, like many do, that things would be different. That this time, he had changed. But some things don't change. They just get better at hiding. What most people didn't know was that Vincent was deeply involved in multiple extramarital affairs. Some casual, some intense, and all carried out with a level of recklessness that bordered on arrogance. He wasn't careful, he just didn't care. He had a long-standing pattern of betraying Joni's trust, and yet expected her to remain faithful, obedient, and quiet. This is the part of the story where you realize Vincent didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. Someone to smile next to him in church. Someone to play the wife role while he did as he pleased. And when Joni stopped playing along, when she started standing up for herself, she became a threat. Not just to his pride, but to his image. In early 2003, Joni gave birth to their 3rd child, a baby boy. By all accounts, she was exhausted but committed to building a better life for her children. She had started going back to church regularly, surrounding herself with support, and making quiet plans to move on, maybe even leave Bakersfield with the kids. This terrified Vincent. Not because he loved Joni so deeply, but because he couldn't stand the idea of losing control. Divorce was expensive. Custody battles were humiliating. And most of all, being exposed as a faithless, absentee father would shatter the image he had so carefully constructed. To the outside world, he was a family man. If Joni left, that illusion would crumble. There's a dangerous kind of narcissist who doesn't care who you are, only what you do for their image. And when you no longer serve their ego, you become disposable. There were warning signs, always are. Joni had confided in close friends that Vincent had been verbally abusive. Once, during their earlier relationship, she had even filed a restraining order. But like so many victims of manipulation, she gave him another chance. She wanted her kids to have a father. She believed in forgiveness. And perhaps, she hoped that time would fix what love couldn't. It didn't. In fact, that summer, as the school year ended and families began planning vacations, Vincent was planning something else entirely. Not a getaway. Not a new beginning. But a massacre. In the weeks leading up to the murders, Vincent began meticulously crafting what would become one of the most calculated alibis in California criminal history. Plane tickets, rental cars, bank transactions. Every detail rehearsed. Every move accounted for. Except for the truth. He thought he was smarter than everyone. Smarter than the cops. Smarter than forensics. Smarter than the woman who once loved him. But you know what they say about men who play God. Sooner or later, they forget that even gods bleed. On July 6, 2003, the summer sun bathed Bakersfield, California, in golden light. Everything seemed peaceful on the surface. But inside a modest home on Cedar Street, a brutal crime was unfolding, quietly, swiftly, and without mercy. There were no screams. No desperate calls for help. Only death, silence, and a killer who turned family into corpses. Joni Harper, 39, was shot multiple times in the head and chest. Her body was found near the front door, suggesting she may have seen the killer and tried to escape, but didn't make it. More disturbingly, she had been stabbed several times after death, a sign of rage rather than random violence. Nearby, two children, Marquez, 4, and Lindsay, 2, were murdered in their sleep. No signs of struggle, no scratches, just two small bodies lying lifeless in bed. In the next room, Joni's mother, 70-year-old Ernestine Harper, was also found shot to death. And finally, perhaps the most heartbreaking of all, was baby Marshall, only 6 weeks old, killed by a single, fatal shot. 5 lives. 3 generations. Wiped out in one night. No survivors. When police arrived at the scene, they noticed several disturbing inconsistencies. The doors showed no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. Cash, jewelry, electronics, everything was untouched. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. The intruder came with one mission: to kill. The murders were clean, calculated, methodical. Each shot was precise. Each victim was eliminated in a cold, clinical fashion. The house remained eerily undisturbed, as if the killer had glided through like a ghost, leaving only death behind. Neighbors didn't hear a thing. Not a gunshot, not a scream, not a thud. Authorities suspected the use of a suppressor, an unusual detail for an ordinary street criminal, but fitting for someone who had time, familiarity with the home, and deep knowledge of the victim's habits. The most glaring clue wasn't what police found, it was what they didn't. The investigation began immediately, and naturally, the first person to contact was Vincent Brothers, Joni's husband, father of the 3 children. But Vincent wasn't in Bakersfield. He was in Ohio, over 2,000 miles away, and seemed eerily composed upon hearing the news. He provided investigators with what appeared to be airtight alibis: a flight from Los Angeles to Columbus on July 2nd, receipts from a car rental, photos with relatives, and a confirmation from his brother that he had been there for days. On paper, Vincent couldn't have done it. The timeline didn't work. The evidence placed him far from the scene. Detectives logged his statements, verified the flight information, and initially removed him from their suspect list. But not everyone on the case was convinced. Some officers felt a nagging unease, something didn't sit right. His grief was clinical, detached. He hadn't broken down. He hadn't cried. He was rational, composed, and too quick to offer documentation, as if the answers were rehearsed. His entire response seemed like a script, and his alibi, though neat, was suspiciously flawless. He claimed he'd flown out east for a family vacation and had no idea what had happened back in California. But investigators decided to take a closer look at the rental car Vincent had been driving in Ohio. And in doing so, they found the one thread that would begin to unravel his entire alibi. A thread not made of fingerprints or confessions, but something far more delicate, yet damning. A trail left by the road, and a few tiny creatures he hadn't planned for. The rental car, a Chrysler, seemed like just another supporting detail in Vincent Brothers' seemingly airtight alibi. But when investigators seized the vehicle and sent it for forensic examination, they never expected it to become the smoking gun that would unravel the entire facade. At first glance, the car appeared clean. No visible damage. Nothing suspicious. But once forensic entomologists began examining the grille and front bumper, they discovered something odd: insect remains. It sounded trivial. A few dead bugs stuck to a car, any road trip would result in that. But here's the catch: these insects weren't from Ohio, the state where Vincent claimed he had been driving the car throughout the July 4th holiday. These bugs were native to desert regions of the western U.S., specifically California, Arizona, and Nevada, species that don't and can't survive in Ohio's temperate climate, especially not in early July. Entomologists were called in for expert analysis. After carefully inspecting the grille and air vents, they concluded that the car had more than 200 insect remains, representing at least 7 different species, most of which are only found along Interstate 40, the major highway that cuts across the country from California to the East Coast. That meant someone had driven the car west, through desert terrain, over thousands of miles, and right around the time the murders took place. One of the entomologists stated in the report, "If this car never left the Midwest, these insects couldn't be here. Either someone drove it through the desert, or these bugs learned to teleport." Police started connecting the dots. Vincent flew from Los Angeles to Ohio on July 2nd. Before that, he arranged to rent the car. There was a significant window of time between when he picked up the vehicle and when he was seen with family in Ohio. The chilling theory was that Vincent had flown to Ohio, rented the car, then driven all the way back to California, crossed the desert in secret, carried out the murders swiftly and silently, then raced back to Ohio as if nothing had happened. This round trip would cover nearly 4,000 miles. Even without rest or delays, it would require at least 50 hours of straight driving. And somehow, he did it. No one drives 50 hours just to say hello, one detective muttered during a briefing. Unless, home is the place where he just murdered everyone. Investigators dug deeper into Vincent's past, and what they found painted a much darker picture. He wasn't the loving husband and educator he pretended to be. In fact, he had a history of domestic violence. Joni, the murdered wife, had previously filed police reports claiming physical abuse. At one point, Vincent was even temporarily suspended from his job over misconduct allegations. The perfect family man image began to collapse. Behind it was a manipulative, controlling individual capable of monstrous cruelty. One young investigator noted, "He kept saying he loved his kids. But a man who loves his kids doesn't shoot them while they're asleep. He didn't just kill them, he erased his entire bloodline." At this point, the case became clear. GPS data, travel logs, forensic entomology, and behavioral inconsistencies all aligned. The once unbreakable alibi crumbled under the weight of real science and relentless investigation. The truth was brutal. Vincent Brothers had slaughtered his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 3 children, then tried to cover it all with a fake cross-country vacation and tears that didn't match the crime. In April 2004, nearly a year after the murders, Vincent Brothers was arrested. When the cuffs were placed on his wrists, he didn't resist. His face stayed blank, no anger, no fear. One of the arresting officers recalled, "He just muttered, 'I didn't do it. I already told you.' But there was no shock in his eyes. Only calculation. After all the brutal calculations, one question still echoes. Why? Why would a father, a school administrator, slaughter his own flesh and blood? The answer, as unthinkable and revolting as it may be, is chillingly simple. Vincent Brothers wanted freedom. Not the noble kind of freedom, but a warped, selfish one. Freedom from responsibility. Freedom from the image of the perfect husband he never truly wanted to be. Freedom from the burden of 3 young children who tied him to a life he was desperate to escape. And perhaps most disturbingly, freedom to pursue a secret relationship, one he had been nurturing for years behind closed doors. Joni had once forgiven him for his infidelities, his abuse, his abandonment. But she had changed. She was no longer submissive. No longer easy to manipulate. In Vincent's eyes, Joni, once a useful facade, had now become an obstacle. A close friend of Joni once shared a haunting memory. Through tears, Joni had confided, "If anything ever happens to me, the first person you should suspect is Vincent." And she was right. Vincent knew that divorce meant consequences. It meant splitting assets, facing public shame, and shattering the carefully maintained image of a good man that he clung to in the community. For a narcissist like Vincent, that was a fate worse than death. So, a horrific plan took root in his mind. No divorce. No custody battles. No scandal. There was only one way to liberate himself. Kill them. All of them. With ice-cold detachment, Vincent Brothers didn't just murder. He erased an entire world, one he was supposed to protect. When Vincent Brothers was arrested in April 2004, the public was stunned. They couldn't believe that a man who once served as a high school vice principal, a model of morality in the community, could be a cold-blooded murderer. News stations repeatedly aired the footage of him stepping out of a police car, his face calm, void of panic or remorse. Many people asked the same chilling question. How can someone look so calm after killing his entire family? In jail, Vincent remained composed, almost offended. He adamantly declared his innocence. "I'm the victim here," he said during his first interrogation. "I lost my wife, my children, and now you want to destroy my name too." But prosecutors had something Vincent couldn't dispute: science. The GPS data from Vincent's rental car confirmed the vehicle had, in fact, traveled from Ohio to California during the exact time of the murders. Gas station stops, highway toll records, traffic cameras, and most damning of all, the insect evidence from desert regions, formed a damning narrative. There was no denying it anymore. Vincent had driven over 2,000 miles to commit murder, then turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. During the 2007 trial, the prosecutor began with a chilling declaration. He didn't kill in a fit of rage. He killed with calculation. He wanted freedom, and the price of that freedom was the blood of his own family. The trial captured national attention. The courtroom was packed. Every new piece of evidence drew audible gasps. At one point, the atmosphere became so tense the judge called for a recess. Each testimony and data point painted a horrific scene inside the Bakersfield home. A 2-year-old child lying motionless in bed. A 6-week-old infant, shot coldly, without hesitation. Ernestine, the aging mother-in-law who had supported the whole family, murdered in her own room. And then Joni, Vincent's wife, who once loved him despite all the red flags, executed mercilessly by the very man she had trusted. A former colleague of Joni took the stand, eyes glassy with tears. "Joni once told me, if she ever disappeared, the first person I should suspect is Vincent. She knew. She just couldn't get out." Vincent's defense team tried to push back. They claimed he was being framed, that the evidence was circumstantial, that he was a devoted father and respected educator. But as the evidence mounted, their argument began to unravel. The more they clung to the image of the perfect man, the more hollow it seemed. Ironically, the most damning testimony came not from a witness, but from the smallest, most overlooked detail: bugs. They couldn't speak, but their dead bodies, lodged in the car, told the entire story. After nearly 3 months of trial, the jury entered deliberation. Outside, hundreds of Bakersfield residents gathered. Some prayed. Some shouted. Others just waited, hoping to learn if justice still existed in this world. When the verdict was read, the entire courtroom fell silent, like the air had been sucked out. The courtroom was silent. As the jury filed back in, all eyes were fixed on them. Some members avoided looking at Vincent, but others stared directly at him, their gazes sharp, almost as if saying, "We see you for who you really are." The judge called everyone to rise. He flipped through the papers slowly, deliberately. In the criminal case of the state of California versus Vincent Brothers, for the charge of first-degree murder of Joni Harper, Ernestine Harper, Marcus Harper, Lindsay Harper, and Marshall Harper. The room held its breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." No gasp. No scream. Just a long, heavy silence. Vincent stood still, expressionless. It was as if he had expected this. But something in his eyes had changed, not arrogance, not rage, but emptiness. This was a man who once believed he could outsmart the justice system. Now, he was just a shell, a mask with nothing left behind it. In the gallery, Joni's family wept. Someone whispered, "Finally, their souls can rest." 1 month later, at the sentencing hearing, Vincent faced the harshest penalty the law could offer, death. The judge's words were piercing. There is no justification for the brutality and cruelty of these acts. This wasn't just murder. This was a calculated massacre of your own family. The people who trusted you, loved you, needed you. When the death sentence was handed down, Vincent didn't flinch. No tears. No pleas. He simply bowed his head, like a man who knew he had already lost everything. But the public wouldn't forget. To the people of Bakersfield, this wasn't just a crime, it was trauma. They had admired Vincent, entrusted their children to the school where he worked. Now, they felt betrayed, not just by a man, but by the very image of the good person he pretended to be. A former teacher at Vincent's school said in a televised interview, "We thought he was a role model. Turns out, it was just a mask. And behind that mask was a monster." Years after the verdict, Vincent Brothers' case is still remembered as a devastating cautionary tale. Everything he had built, his career, his reputation, his family, he destroyed with his own hands in one horrifying act of selfish cruelty. But what people can't let go of is the children. Marcus, just 4 years old. Lindsay, barely 23 months. Marshall, only 6 weeks. They never had a chance to grow up. No school, no birthday parties, no childhood. Because their own father, the man who once cradled them in his arms, chose murder over love. The story of Vincent Brothers isn't just about murder. It's a chilling reminder, sometimes, the killer isn't hiding in the shadows, but sitting right at your dinner table. With a warm smile. With familiar arms. Until the mask falls off. And by then, it's already too late. The Vincent Brothers case didn't just horrify the public with its brutality, it forced us to confront a chilling truth. Not every killer looks like a monster. Sometimes, he's the man praised by his peers, the friend you trusted, the father you admired, or the person sleeping beside you. Vincent Brothers was once seen as the ideal man, educated, respected, articulate. But beneath that polished image was a soul consumed by selfishness and cruelty. Just to claim his twisted version of freedom, he slaughtered his wife, his 3 young children, and even his mother-in-law, people who loved him unconditionally. And the most terrifying part, he nearly got away with it. It took a tiny, seemingly insignificant clue, a single insect stuck to his windshield, for the truth to finally rise from the ashes. This story is a haunting reminder. Never be fooled by appearances. And never forget that it is our moral choices, even the smallest ones, that shape who we really are. We can deceive the world for a while, but we can never outrun ourselves. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story made you pause and think, leave a comment below. What do you think turns a man into a monster like this? Share your thoughts. I read every comment and will respond to the most insightful ones. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more true crime stories, shocking, real, and deeply unsettling. See you in the next video. Stay safe. And always look beyond the mask.